Hi, I'm Katie, and so as you said, I'm in History and Latin American Studies, and
Hi, I'm Emily Armour, and I work in the Educational Technology Department here at Wooster. And so, yeah, today's talk, we want to talk about how you can use Wikipedia editing to address equity gaps. And so here may be some 5 takeaways we're hoping to reach. First of all, why you would use Wikipedia. It's a really big audience. Working with WikiEDU, which I think you're going to love when you see the support that they provide. Katie's going to share some case studies for courses that she has used and how she has tailored those assignments. We're going to talk a little bit about the collaboration between faculty and staff, and then hopefully give you some takeaways for success for you to use it as well. So I'm sure you've all heard of Wikipedia before. Just to be clear, it's a free multilingual online encyclopedia rated the 5th most popular site in the world. It's always in the top 10, but sometimes the 4th or 5th. Combined editions include 333 languages for a total of 61 million articles and 2 billion unique device visits per month. And then the editing is 15 million edits per month, which averages to about 5.7 edits per second. So while we're sitting here. Now, contributors. Who can contribute to Wikipedia? Anyone can. So the whole thing is written and maintained by a community of volunteers. But yeah, I can move on, you guys. 80% of the contributors are male. So the mid-20s males and the retired males are the largest demographics. So maybe there might be bias there. We're just saying, which could be evidenced by the featured articles, which are mostly about warfare, sports, music, and then video gaming. And you can see exponentially how much higher those topics are. So why would you want to use Wikipedia for a teaching and learning tool? Well, I've got to move my stuff, you guys.
we were going to provide stats on actually the racial background of Wikipedia editors, and we couldn't find it. They're not really tracking that, but I can tell you just from our own experience that it does skew heavily white.
So number one, students can identify and address systemic biases, and therefore they can become kind of part of this collective mission that they're making publicly available free knowledge that is inclusive. Number two, writing for a public audience. I mean, that was a pretty big audience I just mentioned, and they can move beyond just their academic peer network, and they're able to share that publicly with someone from their grandmother to an 8-year-old girl, etc. Next, Wikipedia doesn't have a lot of rules, but they do have policies against what they call close paraphrasing. So this means that students editing articles really have to truly understand the material and be able to write it in a way that's accessible, even technical information, to a large audience. And then finally, in terms of writing for the web and real-time collaboration, like what we've talked about earlier today, thousands of volunteer editors, many of who are strangers to you that you have to work with to get these articles edited.
You have to be done here.
Here, now you're thinking, but I don't know how to edit Wikipedia, Emily. Okay, the good news is you don't have to do any fancy coding anymore. There is a WYSIWYG editor, and so you're going to see, here's an example of one of the articles that one of Katie's students worked on. You're going to see those really recognizable editing and formatting tools that you expect otherwise. Okay, I don't know how to teach with Wikipedia though. All right. Well, WikiEDU is a nonprofit organization, and their whole aim, they're not associated with the Wikipedia Foundation, but WikiEDU's whole point is to help promote articles that are either underrepresented or completely missing. And they have a student program that offers training modules, a course dashboard, and support. And we'd like to show you a couple of things. Training modules you're familiar with. They're self-paced, but you as an instructor can assign certain modules, and you and the students can easily see what the progress they're making on those modules. Here's a screenshot of the dashboard from Katie's course, Adding Immigrants, that she'll talk more about in a minute. And she can see the progress they're making on the training. She can view their contributions and assess each part of the assignment. So she can even drill down. I've redacted the students' names here, but click easily into the article that they are working on and see how their progress is going on those tutorials. Then there are real live people who work at the WikiEDU staff who also can monitor the progress, and they can even flag potential issues. And when you see your course dashboard right there on the right-hand side, you can see that there are those 2 women who have been assigned as staff to help Katie with her course, and you can email them and ask for help. We also arranged just before winter break a virtual information session, and 2 of those staff members are pictured there on the right-hand side, just to try to promote using WikiEDU, and they would be more than happy to reach out with, and we could arrange other sessions. You could have your own session. So just to close up on WikiEDU, just in fall of 2022, they supported 363 courses and 6,400 students. And you can see the articles, the new entries, the words, and then 50,000 references. So this is where college students are really helping the content. So this is a little graphic of WikiEDU, and I've talked about kind of a couple of things in the right-hand corner, but now we're going to turn it over to Katie to talk a little bit more about the student editors.
All right. And again, thank you for setting that up. I know people in this room probably have taught with Wikipedia in the past, but I just wanted to say, kind of make a case for the support that WikiEDU provides, making it really easy and accessible. And so I wanted to give case studies about how I specifically adapted it to address these questions about equity and representation and kind of empowering students to be actors from my spring classes. And so I picked one that's a 200 level survey, my Modern Latin America class, and one that's a 101 class where I'm focusing on building quantitative literacy skills. And so honestly, a lot of the planning I do is similar to the planning I do for other assignments, right? It's this backward design. I'm thinking about, okay, how can I get students especially excited about identifying an equity gap, doing research around it, and then especially kind of making their research count, right? And being kind of aware also of their privilege is kind of having access to our institutional resources. And so for my Modern Latin America class, I try to make sure that students get to kind of buy into class following the models of Paulo Freire, right? And thinking about, okay, what's something that's meaningful to me that I want to devote my semester to? And so for this class, the Wikipedia project ends up being kind of an early stage of a longer semester long research project, where this is where they're just kind of picking a topic that's underrepresented, that's meaningful to them, and thinking about how can they use their research to make sure that the topic is better covered. And so the funny thing is actually what they're building towards is a recorded presentation. I'm a big fan of the recorded presentations for all the great reasons that our speakers talked about in the last presentation. But it's really, really good, though, in terms of thinking about how to write for different audiences, and especially how to make sure that things that they're passionate about are more visible to this large audience. For my other class, it's a 101 class. It's focusing on building students' quantitative literacy. Most of them are not history students, but I'm trying to come up with this kind of smaller, discrete exercise where this is a really great way to get them to think about information literacy, about understanding kind of popularly held ideas about immigrants and immigration, and then especially kind of building this idea about how can I use quantitative evidence in an effective and clear way. And so what I'm having them do actually is they're only adding, 2-3 sentences for this project. But what they're doing is saying, okay, I'm going to find 2 reliable pieces of quantitative evidence and integrate it into existing Wikipedia articles. So as I'm thinking about how to build these scaffolding assignments, I like to think about the scaffolding in terms of these steps, from thinking about kind of getting students on board with why we're doing this and why Wikipedia, and then kind of setting them up for success throughout the class. And so honestly, I do spend time in class talking about why Wikipedia, especially when you're talking about freshmen, sophomores. they really have a lot of Wikipedia shame, right? They have really been told that it's not reliable. They should never use it for research. That's embarrassing, right? And so you really have to get them on board with thinking about, okay, well, who reads it? Some of it's good, some of it's not good. There are all kinds of really great discussions they can have. But honestly, a lot of them get on board and get persuaded when they see, okay, actually, I can reach millions of people with this. And it's not an exaggeration. Over the course of the time I've been teaching with this, you can see, right, we're up to, with my class, 33.4 million article views. And so this is important work, and it's important work, especially when we're thinking about improving the quality of articles, especially around topics around immigration, around Latin American history, around Latino history. This is a huge opportunity for them to address this gap that Emily was talking about in terms of kind of the systemic structural biases of Wikipedia. The next step we go through is thinking about how to identify an article that needs improvement. This part is not as hard as you would think. What I get them to do is to pick something that they're interested in and then kind of run through these questions about what's good, what's not. And you can kind of see the structure and the way that this is really good, again, for getting them to think about representation and bias, both in terms of scholarly sources, but in terms of popular sources, like what's missing, where are there holes in this article, how can I make a contribution? The next step is really typical to any kind of project, right? I'm having them do research. And so we'll spend some time on how do you use what counts as a source on Wikipedia, what counts as a source for me for this assignment, how do you use library databases? And then I always have people do annotated bibliographies as kind of a first step in this. And so thinking about showing their understanding of a source. I have them talk about how they're going to fit their work into Wikipedia using the talk page of the article. And so kind of saying, hey, this is what I think is missing. This is what I'm going to add. Most of the time, nothing happens, but sometimes they do get feedback actually from members of the Wikipedia community. Most of it helpful though. I do have them, maybe this is a good time to insert this, I do have them use anonymous names, right? And names that are not identifiable, usually by sex, by gender, by race, as a way to avoid harassment. I have them do their writing and peer review. I have them actually do the writing and editing live on Wikipedia, but the peer review I like to do off-site, right? So I set it up in my Moodle dashboard and I say, hey, present your writing so far. What are the questions you want to know from your peer? What's the feedback you want from them? And before they can kind of move forward with the final project. A lot of times I do encourage their peers actually to make edits in terms of clarity and things like that, just live on the Wikipedia article, but that's something it's harder to get them to do. They are very uncomfortable editing other students' kind of final facing work. And then this last step that I don't think I included in the first slide is celebration, right? I'm borrowing from what I've learned from the EL training, right? Is that you got to take a moment to celebrate what they've accomplished. And so we spend a day in class talking about what article that I worked on, how does my work increase the diversity of topics, the diversity of voices on Wikipedia, and why is this important? And so you can kind of see, it's a great time to kind of come together and think about like the enormity of what they've accomplished. Grading. We wanted to talk about this really quickly. Actually, it's very similar to my other assignment grading. Wikipedia makes it super easy to track process. It makes it really easy. They have a tool where I can click on it and it'll show me and highlights what my student editors have done. I mean, it looks like track changes in words. And so my grading usually is a combination of thinking about process, but also thinking about how well are they demonstrating the learning goals. So again, no real rocket science here. So I think about what do I want them to demonstrate with this assignment, and then how well have they done it? I do have a project memo that comes with this work, so they can kind of talk me through their choices, especially about like how this question about representation and diversity, like how was I attentive to making sure that there are more diverse perspectives on Wikipedia? And so that's easier for me to see their process of thought in a memo. And my other class, kind of similar thing. For this class, I'm doing specifications grading, right? So it's a single point rubric, but thinking about what's important to me, what am I trying to get you to demonstrate here? Have you done it? Have you not? The meaningful things to me is the students' responses. Students are super proud of what they've accomplished because it is important. It's also very important for students who feel like because of their work, their communities, their interests are represented now. And so this kind of form of empowerment through visibility and the sense of belonging, I think is really important. I really like these topics too, because I think it does get kind of a lot of our basic teaching things we're trying to do, right? Thinking about how to shape your communication for different audiences, thinking about information literacy, thinking about how to understand what's covered in popular media, what's covered in scholarly media, and what's missing and why. And so for collaboration, I'm going to turn it over to you, Emily.
So you can tell that Dr. Holt is completely able to work independently through her Wikipedia projects. But at Educational Technologies staff, we have supported faculty over a number of years before WikiEDU was even an option. So we can consult with new faculty who are maybe interested in using Wikipedia and help them see those tools like the timeline of how you can map out the tutorials, how many weeks you want it to take in your course, those types of things. In the past, we've done like a cohort of training with the tutorials for teaching assistants. So if you can get maybe a group of faculty who really want to take the plunge, maybe you could even ask your like ed tech staff if they would be willing to get on board and support the teaching assistants. We employ student workers in our department who work at the library. And so we expect them to have at least a basic level of training on how to edit Wikipedia and what Wikipedia's pillars and rules are, so that they can serve as a resource for students, especially in evenings and weekends if they would need help. And then we try to promote it on campus and support people like Dr. Holt. Like, for example, when we had the presentation from the WikiEDU staff, and are making those arrangements. And then lastly, an edit-a-thon. So we did host an edit-a-thon this spring. Dr. Holt also works with women's gender and sexuality studies, and then got some faculty from the STEM Success Initiative to come together in our student center for a couple of hours, have a meetup page on Wikipedia where students could link the projects that you can see there. So particularly we were doing underrepresented female scientists, for example. And so here we are with Dr. Breitenbutcher and his kilt. We have to throw that in there. And there's Dr. Holt there on the lower left helping one of our students. And you have to have cupcakes, right, to build this community. So I guess our takeaway is we would encourage you to go ahead and visit just dashboard.wikiedu.org to get more information. There's even a place where you can submit if you have further questions, or if you really want to take the plunge for a fall 2023 course, you should apply by July 17th. You would maybe want to know which course it was and what your goals were and maybe how much time frame you were hoping to use Wikipedia for. So we'll stop there. Joe?
Do we have any questions? I was going to ask the one you literally just went in, which is that I have once or twice had faculty members showing up like the week classes start saying, how do we do Wikipedia articles? And while if you are in that situation, there are wonderful resources that will save your bacon on WikiEDU. But what you will not get is help from the WikiEDU Foundation, because they do operate whatever that is, 6-8 weeks in advance. Any other questions or thoughts?
They provide so much support, but from the beginning, thinking about assignments, but also serving as a resource if you run into technological problems or if your students are they've been super supportive, very responsive. And again, their central commitment is to thinking about how can they leverage working with institutions to try to address the coverage gaps and equity gaps in Wikipedia.
Great question from Caitlin in the chat. How do you handle strangers or the public live editing the work your students do and having to interact with the public in a live way with these articles?
Yeah, so I do not get that much live public interaction. Every once in a while, there's some topics I can predict that you'll have a very attentive audience. Anything on Venezuelan politics right now, anything on Cuban American communities. And so we talk about that. I can always, worst case to worst, you get some crazy person who deletes your student's work. I can still see it and grade it and access it. And it's another thing for us to talk about in terms of how voices are silenced. I also talk them through some of the way, I edit with my own name, and we'll look at some kind of less helpful interactions I've had with people as a way to think about how am I treated as a woman on Wikipedia? How am I treated as someone who's trying to write about people who there's not a lot of articles about them in English, right? I do a lot of work on, I work on Brazil. I do a lot of work thinking about Brazilian musicians, or I just created an article for a Brazilian transgender activist who was was a big who'd actually died of pneumonia a couple of years ago. And so convincing kind of just the gatekeepers of Wikipedia that this was worthy of an encyclopedia article was kind of a back and forth process. But it's good for us to talk about, again, because it lets us think about whose history is considered worthy of being an encyclopedia, and how that is also kind of shaped by whose history is worthy of being included in things like the New York Times or other sources of information that Wikipedia values.
Liza?
Yeah, I had two questions, one of which I think Katie, hi again. One of which I feel like you were just heading towards, which is the question of, I had heard, now I've had a Wikipedia assignment that I usually offer it as an option on a menu of choices, and say if you wanted for your essay, you could improve or create a Wikipedia article. But I had heard a long time ago from faculty who said the problem often is that Wikipedia won't let them post, that they determined that something isn't, something that's interesting in a history class isn't necessarily Wikipedia says it's not encyclopedia territory. And so I always just have a caveat and say, you can just write an essay, and if you either technically, or because I don't offer any of these supports, which now I'm thinking I should, I'm if you can't get it up there, or, you try to get it up there and someone says no, you can just hand it in to me, an attempt. But I want to now try it officially, but I'm just wondering, how often slightly more esoteric topics are turned down by Wikipedia, and or how often, it sounds like maybe not so often, but some of the topics, certain things are even shut down, right, on Wikipedia, and pages get locked. And I'm just wondering how often you have either of those problems, which are what make me maybe too afraid to start.
I think there's a higher barrier for creating a new page than adding an existing one. And actually, a lot of times students want to make a new page when actually, given the scope of what we're trying to do, it makes more sense to add a section to an existing page.
Yeah.
Honestly. And so that's what I have people do. I've gotten better with strategies for creating new pages where when I create the page, I'll explicitly say, this meets the Wikipedia guideline for notability in this way when I publish the page. And that's, again, I probably should have been doing that earlier, but it's really helped kind of defend me for making it be less of a pain. It's tricky, right? Because it's the same obstacles. I mean, as you who works with students often with sources that aren't in English, that's a challenge, right? And so finding sources that the average English language Wikipedia article recognizes as valid can be a little bit of a challenge. But I mean, I've done it recently. You just have to be super explicit about why it's important and why it meets the standards. It's a very legalistic kind of culture.